Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, securing and protecting email services. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a hot topic. It's affecting so many companies out there, these attacks coming in maliciously via email. And we'll be talking about that today on the EcoCast. But you need to do whatever you can do to better protect yourself. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. On this event, you'll hear from our experts at KnowBe4, Duo, and Druva. Now, before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about today's EcoCast event. Of course, as always on the EcoCast, we've got some awesome prizes lined up for you. I'll be talking about those as well as the eligibility requirements here in just a moment. We also encourage your questions there in the questions pane. Many of you have already found that right next to the word handouts in your console. It says questions. If you click in there, we are here to take your questions. We're all former IT professionals here at Actual Tech Media. We know how tough it can be in the world of enterprise IT to solve solutions to your technology challenges, and our experts are here to help. Post your questions there in the questions pane. We also have our best question prizes, which I'll talk about in just a moment. I'll be doing Q&A sessions with our expert presenters, and so we encourage your questions. I'll also have a few poll questions for you out there in the audience, and I'll be sharing the results of those polls with you. So we want to hear your feedback. And then next topic here, social. We want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly there from your audience console using the Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen, and the hashtag for the EcoCast will be automatically appended. You'll also find social media icons on the top right-hand side of your console. And then finally, resources. There in the handouts tab, you'll find 3 hand-selected resources, one from each of today's expert presenters. You'll find a link to the KnowBe4 how to start your free phishing security test link. You'll find a PDF resource from Duo on passwordless, the future of authentication. And then finally from Druva, you'll find a download on how to enhance Microsoft 365 data protection with third-party backup. So I encourage you to check out those resources in the handouts tab. Now, I said that we have prizes. We have 3 Amazon $500 gift cards to give out today on the EcoCast. You must be live in attendance to qualify, and winners will be announced by me, the moderator, during the event, one after each of our 3 presentations today. We also have our best question prize. This is for 3 Amazon $50 gift cards, one for each of our 3 sessions. So enter your questions there during each of the sessions, and that will qualify you for the best question prize drawings. Of course, all prize winners must also meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. As part of that, all prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. Now, thanks to generous prize winners over the years, we have donated thousands of dollars to the charities you see here on the screen. If you win a prize and you'd like to donate to charity, we would love to help you do that. We've done that in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can download free educational IT books at gorilla.guide. You'll find a link to that there in your handouts tab. We're releasing new Gorilla Guides every month. Hot new topics, cutting edge stuff in enterprise technology, all free, all fun, all educational ebooks. So make sure that you check those out. The hashtag for today on Twitter is ATM EcoCast, and you can follow Actual Tech Media as well, at Actual Tech Media on Twitter, and me, David M. Davis, as well. Hope to hear from you over on Twitter. You can subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels, YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast. And we post all of our latest and greatest content over on over on LinkedIn. So make sure there that you check us out on LinkedIn. You can find a link to the LinkedIn homepage for Actual Tech Media on the top right-hand side of your audience console. So now before we get into today's topic and I introduce you to our first presenter from KnowBe4, by the way, Roger has a fantastic presentation lined up. I've seen a sneak preview of it. I want to just set the stage here for a moment on security and protecting email in enterprise IT today. So I looked up some statistics on this, and I mean the statistics are staggering. We see, just a boatload of breaches. They're in the evening news. Every day they're on the front page of news websites. All these different ransomware attacks, and so many of them start with email. They come in via email, via phishing, and then from there it turns into a ransomware attack, and then from there it turns into a data breach, data exfiltration. Then the company's data is being sold. Then the employee's data is being sold. So it's a really scary time. One survey said that 83% of organizations have experienced data breaches in the last 12 months. So that's the vast majority, needless to say, of organizations. 83% of those organizations that were polled. And I'll be polling you here on these same type of statistics in just a moment. We want to hear your feedback as well. And then another statistic said 95% of IT leaders believe that client and company data is at risk via email. And so that's just about all of IT leaders out there. There is risk in sending, of course, and receiving email, a lot of risk. 59% of organizations have seen an increase in email data leaks with increased remote work. So with all of us working from home due to the pandemic, we're doing a lot more email, a lot fewer face-to-face, or even perhaps fewer in-person meetings, and we're sending a lot more email. And so because of that increase in email, there's also an increase in data loss via email or breaches via email. And then another statistic here I found very interesting, 85% was the number of Microsoft 365 business customers that have experienced a data breach. So just because you put your data in the cloud or your email in the cloud, that really doesn't make it any less or more secure, right? Still 85% of Microsoft customers have experienced a data breach. And that same report had a large section about how humans are the weakest link. And that's exactly what Roger from KnowBe4 will be speaking about here in just a moment. So now I want to hear from you. I want to hear your take out there in the audience. I've got 4 poll questions here for you. The first one is on the screen now, and I'll be sharing the results of these, and you can see how you compare to your fellow IT professionals who are on the event today. The question on the screen is, before today, how interested were you in the topic of securing and protecting your email services? Were you very interested, like this is high on your priority list? Were you interested, like meh? It's something I'd like to look into. Someone interested, maybe you've heard the stories in the news, and you said we need to do something about that, or it just really wasn't on your radar at all, and you're here because you want to learn something new. So I'll leave that up there for just a moment. Let everyone respond to that while I review your comments in the questions pane. All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. Let me go ahead and share the results. Actually, I'm not going to share the results on that one. Let's just move on. But most of you, it did say that the vast majority of you had already had a very high interest in this topic. So thank you for sharing that. Next question on the screen, and I will share the results of this one. And I will keep your name anonymous. Have you ever experienced a ransomware attack or data breach personally? Yes, or maybe no, but you know someone who has, or not yet, thankfully. All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to this poll. Let me go ahead and share the results now. And 22% of you said yes, you've personally experienced a ransomware attack or data breach. 41% said no, but you personally know someone who has experienced that. 36% said not yet, thankfully. So the vast majority of you either know someone or have personally experienced a ransomware attack or data breach. And then, so if you experienced a ransomware attack or data breach, I'm curious to know, what was the source? Did it come in via email? Was it a network security failure? Was it, insider, maybe a malicious employee of some kind took the data out, or, maybe you just still don't even know the source of the breach, or was it just not listed here? And if so, post it in the questions pane there, and I'm curious to hear what I didn't list in the options for this poll. And 43% said they experienced a ransomware attack or data breach, and the source was email. 8% network security failure, 1% insider access. 32% just don't know. They had a breach, but they still don't know the source of that breach, and that's kind of scary to see. 13% had a attack, but the source wasn't listed there. So thank you to everyone who responded to that. And then a final poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter, and that's what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing security solutions, specifically around protecting email and securing your IT infrastructure? Is this something you're interested in doing in the next 6 months? You need to take action kind of right away, or 6 to 12 months, or 12 to 24 months, or not quite sure? All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. It is time now to introduce you to our first presenter. Welcome again, great to have back Mr. Roger Grimes, Data-Driven Defense Evangelist at KnowBe4. Roger, take it away.
Well, thanks everyone for showing up for my incredible ways you can be hacked using email and how to stop the bad guys. What I'm hoping to cover is a couple or a few different ways of how you can be hacked from email. And I would say that in general, most people, even in the IT security world, probably haven't seen these methods. So I hope, and if not, even if you've seen one, I'm providing two, or at least one that you haven't seen before. If you don't know me, I'm Roger Grimes. I'm a 34-year computer security consultant, data-driven defense evangelist for KnowBe4. I've written 12 books, working on my 13th book, and over 1,100 magazine articles on computer security. There's some of my books. My latest one was Hacking Multi-Factor Authentication, which I don't think we'll be talking about that much today. And I work for KnowBe4, the world's largest integrated security awareness training and simulated phishing platform vendor. We help people not to get phished. But again, I just want to talk about different cool ways. Well, I guess cool if you're a hacker, not so good if you're the victim. But it's good that if you're a defender, just to be aware that these sort of things can be done. The first one I show you, and they're all real world attacks, but the first one I'll show you is probably going to be the least common. And then I'll show you, they'll get more and more common as we go on the way. But again, probably most people haven't heard or seen any of these three ways. So usually it's a, kind of what do we call a crowd pleaser type of thing. But the first one has to do with password hash theft. Most people know that when you log into an operating system, Windows or Mac or Chrome or something like that, that your plain text password, suppose you typed in frog, most operating systems will convert that plain text password to a cryptographic hash using the cryptographic hash algorithm. Different operating systems and different versions of those operating systems use different types of cryptographic hashes. Like older Windows versions use something called the LAN-MAN LM hash, but those are considered weak today and no longer used. So today, if you use Windows and you type in a password, you'll get it will hash that password with what's called the NT hash, which is a fairly decent hash. It's kind of in the middle of all the possible hashes you could use in the world, but it's not bad. If you're on an older Linux or Unix or Apple system, you might have been using something called MD5, Message Digest 5. That is now, like LM, considered weak and no longer used. These days, if you're using Linux or Unix or Apple or something, you're probably using SHA-2, maybe SHA-1, but SHA-2 is probably what most people are using. Or if you're really lucky and you have a super strong, secure operating system like OpenBSD, you might be using Bruce Schneider's bcrypt. But in any case, whatever your hash is, whenever you type in your plain text password, the operating system hashes that. Usually, even if your password's kept in memory, it will be hashed and not the plain text password. If it's stored on disk, like on Windows, if you log into a local Windows computer, your password hash is stored in a file called the Local Security Accounts Manager database, or SAM. It's kind of a pseudo file registry. If you're logging into a Microsoft Active Directory network, your password hash will be stored on all the different domain controllers within the same forest in a file called ntds.dit. If you're on a Linux, Unix, Apple system, your password hash will be stored in a file called shadow, or maybe a password file called passwd for password. But the idea and the reason why your plain text password gets hashed is the idea that if a hacker is somehow able to get a hold of your password hash, they don't immediately get your password. And that can be a good thing in trying to protect you. Now, on some networks like Windows networks, the password hash itself can kind of be used as your credential. But attackers, even if they get your hash, would always like to crack it back to the plain text equivalent. And let me say that to get your hash in the first place, prior to what I'm going to show you today, every single method I know about, if a hacker want to get your hash, they had to break into your local computer or on the domain controller or something like that, and they had to be the highest level administrative account they could be, local system, and even that had to then be converted to the local system account. And in a Unix, Linux, Apple system, they have to be in as root, but they had to be in a very privileged account to be able to even have an attempt at getting a hold of your password hash. But so the attacker pretty much had to kind of be demigod already. But if they got your hash and they wanted to get it back to your plain text password, and it's always better to have your password hash and or your plain text password. All hackers want to get to your plain text password if they can, because then they can use it on any login prompt from anywhere that prompts you for a login name and password. And so if they've captured your hash, they will try to crack it back, called cracking it back to the plain text password, using something called either a hash cracking table or a rainbow table. There's a couple of different types and names. On the screen, I'm showing you one called OptCrack. That's a Windows GUI one. It's the only reason I put it up here is good, easy GUI one to demonstrate. The most common password hash cracking tool today is called Hashcat. That's what all the hackers use and all the people trying to crack hashes. Although when I was cracking hashes for a living, I used John the Ripper, which was a pretty common, still hanging around password hash cracker. But essentially, when you have a password hash or a rainbow table, the attacker will take the captured hashes that they've stolen from the person or the system, put them to the hash cracker. They will then upload a password dictionary of some type that has a whole bunch of words that have already been hashed, and then compare to see if two or more hashes match each other. If they do, they know the plain text password the hash was gotten from is also the plain text password of the password hash they stole. What's different today that I'm going to show you is that you simply opening an email or clicking on a URL link can transmit your password hash to an attacker over the internet that then is able to crack it or at least start taking attempts to crack it. So that's what's new. The way this works is that a hacker has to create a malicious web server of some sort on the internet. They create an object on that web server. They then create a URL that points to the object on that web server. They send the link to the victim, usually via email. The victim opens the email. Most of the time, they have to click on the link. They have to be social engineered to click on the link. But when they do that, their email client or browser acting as an email client will try to download that resource that's on that web server on the internet. And then that web server says, I'm sorry, I don't take anonymous connections. You have to log on to me. And the browser, many times, if it has what's called integrated Windows authentication, and most of the popular browsers do have this, will attempt to do this NT challenge response with the web server as if it's going to log in as the person, even if it's not able to log on in. But the attacker can actually take that NT challenge response from that, capture the NT hash, and then start to crack it. So again, the attacker is going to create this fake web server. They're going to send a link to the fake web server. The email client is going to open the link, and then that link will try to download an object. It will take a login to download that object, and then the web server will grab the NT challenge response that happens from the user's email client trying to download that object, then crack it back to plain text password. In a particular video I'm getting ready to show you, Kevin Mitnick is using a trick called file:// in the URL. So typically when somebody gets a file in an email that has file : / in it, it's what's known as a net BIOS link or a net BIOS moniker, which tells the system that it's going to download a file on the local network or their local system. But instead of the file being on the local system, Kevin then tricks it to go in on the internet. And when it tries to download the file on the internet, he's able to steal the NT password hash and able to get to the password, the plain text password. If you want to watch this demo after today, there's a link on your screen you can follow, or you can go to my CSO Online magazine article that I wrote about this attack and how it works. Probably been a couple of years ago now, but stand by, watch this video. It only takes a minute or so, but if you've never seen it before, usually it's quite startling. So I'm going to let that video roll.
This is the attacker system in the cloud, in the Amazon cloud in Virginia. And I'm logged into Outlook 365 here. I'm simply just going to click on the email. I just clicked. It takes a second for Office 365 to load. And here we go. We could see that the email's from Roger Grimes at nsa.gov, which is quite interesting. And there's nothing there. There's no hyperlink to click on. There's no attachment. But if we go over to the attacker system over here in the cloud, we were able to intercept or obtain the victim's NTLM v2 hash. So let's go ahead and try to do this. So we're going to go ahead and highlight this. We're going to copy it. We're going to go over to our password cracker over here. We're going to create a file. Here we go. We're going to paste in the hash. Very simple. And then what I'm going to do is just run a shell script that tries to crack the hash through a dictionary attack. And this is using a tool called Local Hashcat. And guess what? It's already cracked the hash. So if we scroll up here, we see it was a user named Kevin, right? And the password to the hash is Kevin123.
Okay, I mean, we've all, this is how it worked. Kevin used a web server or white hat hacking software that anybody can download from GitHub called Responder, and it was acting as a web server. And then he created that malicious email. In Kevin's demo, he just opened the email. It looked like nothing was there, and that's how it captured the password hash. But it really was this embedded link in there that tried to download this file. I will tell you, I've done this demo hundreds of times, and most of the time you have to trick the user into clicking on a URL, and it really isn't that hard. Social engineering works all the time, but people will say to me, hey, if I click on a phishing link, but I don't run any files, can I be hurt? I used to say no for a long time, but because of this specific attack, I now say yes. And the idea is that if I can trick somebody into clicking on a link, there is a strong chance I can get their password. Not all the time. It doesn't work everywhere. As a matter of fact, you've got to have a couple preconditions that are there, including you haven't applied the patch that closes this. But let me say most people have not applied that patch that closes this hole. And I always tell people, instead of me guessing at whether it would work in your system or not, I want you to set up your own demo environment. You need to know a little bit of Linux. If you don't know a little bit of Linux, then get with a friend that does, but you can download one of those popular white hat hacking Linux distros, Kali Linux. You download that, follow these 10 or 11 instructions here, and you will be able to set up your own demo just like Kevin did identically and see if it will work inside of your environment. With that said, I have now run this over 100 times in all kinds of people's networks and environments, and I've never not had it work. It always seems to work. It doesn't always got to work, but it has worked when I've done it. I have friends that do it. It works with friends. The only difference, again, is that Kevin did a demo where he just opened the email. That typically takes some type of unpatched 0 day. At the time, it was an unpatched flaw that didn't even have a patch out. It's been patched now. And there actually is even a larger patch by Microsoft that you can download. It's an optional patch, and no company I've ever been into has ever downloaded that patch. And this used to be, when I first started talking about this attack years ago, I used to go, oh, they're not very popular. It's barely ever used. As a matter of fact, I hadn't known of it being used at all in the real world, but now I've discovered a couple attacks over the last 6 months or a year in 2021 where it has been used in real attacks. Like here's an example here where it was a watering hole that targeted Ukrainian and Canadian organizations, but you can see it was essentially the same thing. People were tricked into going into a website that had some JavaScript that captured their NTLM hashes. Essentially, that description is exactly what I just showed you. And here for sure is another attack that happened in San Francisco in 2020. And the same thing, look what it says, what they did is the attacker tricked people into clicking on the free San Francisco Wi-Fi airport connection, but it wasn't. It was a fake connection. And they had put in a fake link in there that pointed to a PNG graphics file using the file colon forward slash. It actually needs 4 forward slashes there. They didn't tell you that in the article. And then it retrieved the NT hashes. So these are now being used in real world attacks to steal people's passwords by simply getting them to click on a link that has been placed on a website or sent to them in an email. So how do you defend against it? Well, first of all, if your password hash gets stolen and you don't want it to be cracked back to the plain text password, you need a password that's strong enough to withstand cracking. And what that means is a 16 character or longer password. You at least want to have 12 characters. 8 character Windows passwords can now be broken in under 15 minutes. No matter if you have an 8 character Windows password, no matter what your password is, it can be cracked in under 15 minutes using cloud computing and the password hash cracking rigs they have today. So you want at least 12 characters, and really 16 characters if you don't want it to be cracked. You can also, on your firewall, block these ports. These are all the ports that can be used to capture your hash, so you can block them. You can filter inbound file forward slash links. Most people don't use them. And lastly, there is an optional Microsoft patch that you can apply that I've never seen anybody apply because it's optional. So if you're worried about these types of attacks, you can apply this defense. Here's another type of interesting attack, completely different than that one, and that is a lot of people's emails, like Microsoft Office 365 and Gmail and Yahoo Mail and all that stuff. They have these SMS recoveries, so that if you lose your password or you lose your even multi-factor authentication MFA device, you can send a code to your phone and an SMS message, put that into the website, and recover your account. Well, turns out that a hacker can use that against you. If they know that you have an email address that has SMS recovery in it, they can use it against you by pretending to be that account or IT from that account. Like for this example, suppose they know that you have a Gmail account. They could send you on your phone, they need to know your phone number to send you the message where they say, "Hi, we're from Google Security. We've detected a rogue sign-in to your Good Guy account. In order to determine a legitimate login, we're going to send a verification code to your previously registered phone number from another Google support number. Please retype the sent verification code and respond to this message, or your account will be permanently locked." You have to give them that fear of God at the end, so they'll do what you tell them to do. Then the hacker goes to Google's Gmail site, puts in the victim's email address, claims they forgot their password. Gmail is nice and says, "You want me to try another way?" And when you click on try another way, they can actually choose SMS, and it sends the SMS code to the person's phone. The person gets that code. "Hey, your Google verification code is this." They type it back into the original message, and boom, it is game over. And this can be done lots and lots of ways. It has been used to, just be aware of these rogue recovery messages. Be aware if someone calls you. If someone says, "Hi, Mr. Grimes, we're from your bank. We think we've spotted some fraud on your account. Hey, we're going to send you a code to verify who you are. We're going to send you a code. So when we get that code, let us know who you are." You do not know who anybody calling you on the phone is. You don't know who anybody texting you is unless you have their phone number previously put in your contact list. So be careful about any of these SMS or voice-based calls trying to quote unquote help you, because it could be a rogue recovery person. Matter of fact, I had just recently my my bank company called to tell me my credit card had been compromised for the 3rd time, like in 3 months. And they never tell me. They're like, "It had nothing to do with you. It was some web server or some service that got compromised, had nothing to do with you, but we got to send you a new card." And they're like, "Hey, we're going to," they started asking me a lot of questions. I was like, "I don't know who you are. How do I know you're from my bank?" And they said the best thing I ever heard. They said, "Call the number in the back of your card." And I thought that was so great, because I was not going to trust the person on the phone to start asking me questions, but they said, "Call the number in the back of the credit card." I did do that and found out my card really had been compromised for the 3rd time. It's going to be a bit of a pain to have to update all my websites online when I buy stuff. But anyways, the last attack I want to show you, it's a very interesting one. This is a pretty popular attack. So the first attack I showed you, the password hash theft one, not super popular, being attempted, but not real popular. Then the SMS fake recovery one, more popular than the last one, but not super, super popular. This one I'm getting ready to show you is more popular. Not the most super popular thing in the world, but again, more popular, and actually has been going on for decades. And that is the idea that hackers are using your email client automation against you. Most of the sophisticated email clients like Microsoft Office and Gmail and Thunderbird and Apple Mail and stuff, they have kind of macro or scripting capabilities or this automation so that, you know, if you're getting an email that comes from your boss, you can highlight it. Or if you're getting an email that comes from one of your parents, you can put it in a special folder or something like that. Or you can create special stationery that's real pretty that you send out to people. Well, hackers for a long time have been, if they've compromised somebody, so they've broken into your computer, they've been modifying your email rules so that they can do bad things. They can do things like, you know, say, anytime this person gets an email, send me a copy or delete this email or something like that. But they've been abusing whatever it takes, any of the automation that's in the email client. So the email rules, or in Gmail, they call them filters, or their forms or com add-ins or scripting, anywhere where they can insert maliciousness, they will. And then it's almost never detected by anti-malware or antiviruses, and it's not deterred by password changes. I'll have victims call me and say, Roger, I know somebody's in my email and they're attacking my clients and my customers, and I've gotten a new laptop and I've changed my password and they're still somehow getting to them. I don't know how they're doing. I'm like, go check your email rules and forms, because a lot of times that's where they're hiding. They've been using this trick forever. They even like to create themselves back doors where all they got to do is send an email with a trigger word like frog, and it kicks off a back door and lets them back in. If you want to see where rules and forms are in Outlook, in this example here, you have to open up Outlook. You go to File, Option, Rules and Alerts. Most people don't have any rules and alerts. If you had any, you would see them there, although we could click, hey, add a new rule. And maybe I'm going to act like I'm a hacker or a spammer. I'm going to say, apply this rule on all messages this victim receives. Say, when an email comes from any message that is received, I want you to forward it to me, the bad guy, the rogue person at rogue.com. This is a very common email rule. Like ransomware people will break in and start eavesdropping on C-level executive emails and IT security emails, and they'll say, hey, every email that comes in, send me a copy, or just send me emails that have the word hacker in it or ransomware or something like that. So they can create all these rules, put them in people's accounts. Again, in Gmail, they're called filters. They're not as sophisticated, but most of these allow you to put scripting languages in there as well. So if it can be scripted, it can be done. And I've seen attackers do really crazy things over the years, including I've seen hackers that had like a trigger word. Again, I'll just use frog. And they're like, if I send my email the word frog, format all the hard drives so the cops can't find any data and that sort of stuff. If it is if they can accomplish whatever they're trying to do using scripting or a program, you can do it in email. And in Outlook, you could even start applications and run a script and stuff like that. These days, there's something called Empire Powershell that all the kids are using, that all the hackers are using. If you've not heard of the Empire PowerShell toolkit, you should go download and use it. But essentially allows people to remotely install these rogue rules and forms. So all you have to have is an email address and password. Maybe we got it by using one of the previous tricks. But if you have a person's email address and password, you can actually remotely install a rogue form that kind of does the same thing. If you want to see forms in Outlook, you'd have to go to File, Quick Access Toolbar, tell it to add the button called Design a Form. And when you do that, it adds this Design a Form and Design this Form button. Then you click that. You'll see these different default forms that are in Outlook. Message is the default form that all email messages are shown in when our emails are shown in. And you can click on View Code and insert code. And like in this example, I said, hey, insert this code to run netcat.exe. Netcat.exe is like a hacker toolkit, and this command is telling it, when I run this email, and I trigger this rule or I trigger this form, use netcat to connect back to the rogue server.com on the internet over port 443, so maybe it's encrypted over TLS, and then run the executable command com. This opens up what's called a reverse command shell and let the attacker kind of take over the machine. Then all the attacker would have to do is publish that form, even give it a different name like standard inbox form, and literally all the attacker has to do is create an email on their system with a form called standard inbox form, send it to the victim, and it can be an email that's blank. or it could look like any advertisement they ever saw in their life, and it will kick off and run that form. So what's changed again is that there are now attacker tools where somebody can do it remotely. SensePost Ruler is a tool that anybody can use. If you want to download that from GitHub, you can. But this is a white hat hacker tool, but the bad guys can use it as well. Usually they're using Empire PowerShell. But again, I'm going to show you a demo of how somebody has a login name and password and email address to somebody. It's actually by a good white hat company called SensePost, just trying to show you how it can be done. But essentially, it is going to create a form and then trigger it to open up an Empire PowerShell reverse command shell. This is a pretty wild video. If you've never seen it, it's probably as wild as the first one I showed you with Kevin Mitnick leading it there. So I'm going to be quiet while this run happens pretty quick. I'm going to try to explain it as it goes along. It goes kind of quick at the top. They have an Empire, or they have a SensePost Ruler tool. They're checking the version number. Now this is the victim client and Outlook. They're showing you that they don't have any rules or forms right now. It's all blank. On the right side of the screen, they have Process Explorer by Microsoft showing you what's running. And at the first Ruler tool that they run at the top, they're showing you the email address of the person, and the form is going to be called Display. They're just checking to see that using the password they put in, they could connect to that email client. At the bottom, it's Empire PowerShell listening agent. They're showing you there's no agents yet. At the top, they're going to have Empire PowerShell reverse shell. They're going to obfuscate it so it can't be found by antivirus. And now they're going to kick off their attack. So they're connecting to the email victims, adding a form called demo, and they're including in that form the Empire PowerShell reverse shell. Here it is. The tool's now connecting to that Outlook client. It's creating that malicious form, and then it's going to kick off that form by sending an email that, when the email is opened or looked at, kicks off the Empire reverse shell. So now they're going to the client. You'll see the email arrive. And again, on the right side of the screen, it's Process Explorer, SysInternals Process Explorer. You'll see a command shell. There's the fake email, and boom. Now see that conhost.exe? That's a PowerShell, Empire PowerShell reverse shell opening up a listening agent to the hacker's computer. So again, all they did was, and now they're on that victim's computer with complete control of that system. All they did was have the email address and password, kick off the SensePost Ruler tool to inject a malicious form and activate it, so it opened up a reverse Empire reverse command com shell back to the hacker's server. Pretty wild, huh? Okay, if you didn't know, again, what happened there is they created this rogue form called demo. They inserted an encrypted version Empire PowerShell and then kicked off a reverse command com shell. And all the person did was like hover over the email, and boom, that conhost.exe is the reverse command com shell Empire PowerShell coming back to the victim's machine. So what are the defenses here? Well, first of all, you should check for rogue rules and forms at least once a year, twice a year. Microsoft has a script called Get All Tenants Rules and Forms for Office 365 clients. SensePost made a script called Not Ruler for on-premises Exchange servers, and I haven't found one for Gmail or Thunderbird or Linux, but I guess you could create your own script. With that said, I want to thank everybody for coming along with me today. Be from Know Before. If you're wondering whether your passwords are out there on the internet one way or another, you can run our password exposure test tool. That will go look on the dark web and the internet and see how many of your employees or your company's passwords are hanging out there on the internet, and let you know. And we don't have time to take questions today, but if you have questions, feel free to email me at rogerg@knowbefore.com, and I promise to respond to you within 24 hours. And you can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And with that, thanks for putting up with me and my fast talking self.
All right. Excellent presentation, Roger. Wow. So much information, so much knowledge, some really scary demonstration videos there of hacking with email. So thank you for your excellent presentation. I want to point out the poll question I've just brought up for everyone out there in the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Know Before solution? I'll leave that up here for a moment and let everyone respond to that before we move on to our next presentation on today's EcoCast. All right, thank you to everyone who responded there in the poll. If you haven't responded yet, I encourage you to do so. For those who did respond, check out the handout tab there as well. And there's a link right at the top to the Know Before Start Your Free Phishing Security Test. Know Before has so many excellent free tools I can say that we at Actual Tech Media are know-before customers as well. As well. I've gone through many of the training courses, and they're always interesting. I always learn a lot. So I encourage you to check out knowbefore.com, check out their free resources, and do a trial for yourself. I'm sorry we didn't have time for live Q&A with Roger. I know I would have enjoyed that, but I am routing your questions that have been coming in electronically over to Roger. And so looks like we've gotten a handful of questions. I encourage you, if you have a question for Roger, now's the time to get it in. Don't forget about our best question prize that we're running as well on the EcoCast today for a $50 Amazon gift card for each session. And you have to ask a question to start, and of course meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. All right, so excellent questions, excellent poll responses. Thank you to everyone. It's now time to announce our first Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Jay Chandaran from Arizona. Congratulations, Jay or Jai Chandaran from Arizona. 2 more gift cards still to give out on the event today, and of course our best question prizes as well. And with that, it's now time to move on to our next presentation on today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Richard Archdeacon, Advisor CISO, and Josh Green, Technical Marketing Engineer at Duo. Richard and Josh, it's great to have you. Take it away.
Good afternoon, and welcome to a discussion on passwordless as being the essential next step in the Zero Trust journey. I'm joined by my colleague Josh Green, who's the lead technologist here with us at Xero covering EMEA. We're going to be talking about the whole concept of Zero Trust, but also passwordless. How do they come together in order to secure the organization and help the user? So Josh, let's just refresh on a few of the basic concepts around Zero Trust that we follow within Duo.
Yeah, absolutely. Zero Trust is a big area. That's why we always like to talk about the fact that there's no such thing as a Zero Trust. You can't buy one on a shelf. And Duo really focuses on one particular aspect of it, which is user interaction with systems and also the devices that they're using to perform that interaction. Collectively, we call that the workforce. And it breaks down into really 3 pillars for us. One is trusted users, which is really identity focused, right? I need to establish who you are before I let you into anything because it's table stakes. If I can't figure out who's coming into my stuff, I definitely shouldn't let that entity in, right? But we obviously learned pretty early on, through all the breaches that have happened in the last number of decades, that that's not quite enough either, though, because if the device that the user brings with them is not trustworthy or if it's compromised in some way and we're unable to verify that, then even a user of confirmed identity shouldn't be allowed in. And that was a lesson that was probably first taught, drastically to us all the way back in 2013 with the Target breach, where it was in fact an authorized user trying to do an authorized thing with a compromised device. But that also taught us a third lesson, which is just as critical as the other 2, which is that even if you've got an authorized user, even if you have a potentially trustworthy device, a one-size-fits-all policy for checking that really isn't good enough, because it's going to be undoubtedly too strict for certain low-risk activities and block users from doing things that just makes their lives harder. And it's going to be not strict enough for the really sensitive things we want to stop people from doing. And so the real key is to put this level of granularity of policy and control at the application level so that we can protect any application individually. And really, that takes the earlier concept of segmentation and then micro-segmentation to its logical conclusion, which is that every application can act as its own segment of the network. And so that's really what we're talking about in our area when we're talking about Zero Trust for the workforce. Richard?
So that's ensuring that we have trusted access to our applications and our resources based on 3 areas really of control: user, device, and application. I think it's very important, Josh, there you mentioned the importance of users, because making it easy for users is going to be absolutely critical going forward. We don't want to burden the user with a lot more difficulty in accessing their resources, because after all, they come to work to do their job, not to do security. So ease of use for the user is really important when they authenticate.
Absolutely. And we see so many, if you're designing a security solution, If you've said to yourself, well, in designing my security policy, user experience is just going to have to be a casualty of security, you're going down the wrong path. We've done a lot of other talks in the past about how that takes you down an avenue where, you know, any user with a credit card and a deadline becomes really dangerous at that point if the user experience is bad. And that's something we really want to avoid. The two need to go hand in hand.
Right, so this approach gives us the never trust, always verify basis, the core for going forward. But now let's just talk a little bit about some of the issues around passwords and why we need to look at the whole issue of passwords. I think you've got some interesting numbers here about passwords and some of the issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's a funny one because, you know, within an organization, it's really surprising to realize how much time, and of course, time being money, how much money is devoted to servicing the password, the ever-present password. And, you know, LastPass did some research, and, you know, it depends on whose research you look at. Sometimes this number is really, really high, like 190. But even on the low end, you're looking at, you know, research showing people with 50, 60, 70 passwords. And, you know, in an ideal world, right, these people are actually using 50, 60, 70 unique passwords that are strong, that have 16 characters. They definitely don't use them on other websites, except that's not true, right? Research consistently shows, you know, the Instagram breach was one of the more notable ones, that even in online services, the most common password breached was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they get reused all over the place. And, you know, so you go up, if you went up to somebody, right, and you were just relying on, you know, their own word for it and said, hey, would you like to get hacked today? No one you approached on the street would say no. Yes, I'd really love to get hacked today. They're all going to say no. But the reality is how far they're willing to go to not get hacked. Sadly, not very far, right? And so as a result, third statistic there, 81% of breaches still involve weak or stolen credentials. And so, you know, despite, 30 years now of education on password strength and not reusing them and all that stuff, you know, it hasn't solved the problem. And so whenever that happens, you know, they say the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It's time to move on from passwords.
I can very much see that whole issue of cost as well. It's always said that one of the biggest issues after the summer holidays or after a long bank holiday weekend, when people have had time away from work, password resets just rocket up as part of the help desk's tasks. So that's always that peak. But I think you're also identifying there a couple of points. One is that whole issue of user experience. If we make it hard, then we will make it less secure. And also the relevance of this threat vector, this vulnerability, which can be exploited by hackers really very successfully in the past. So we developed this concept of zero trust with those three pillars, but we still have this issue around passwords during perhaps the authentication process or during part of the user interaction. So we're checking the devices, segmenting access to applications, but we still got the users. So the two seem to come together, this whole idea of passwords, zero trust, and passwordless. So what are some of the issues around passwords or how we go forward with passwords going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, the other problem that we see is that obviously up until now, it's been the only way to get you access to lots of different things from any device. And, you know, the other challenge that you have there is obviously what were you going to give users back in the day to do strong authentication, right? In the beginning, you had to give them a hard token, right? And obviously the RSA breach in 2011 revealed why that was not an airtight strategy. And even after that, though, you know, you had soft tokens, but there were some issues with the fact that they stored their keys on the hard drive, and you know, biometrics was really not a big thing, right? You know, for years, different laptop manufacturers tried to put those little finger scanners on the front of the machine, and adoption was just really not that good. And then all of a sudden, the smartphone came along, and now all of a sudden, a huge percentage of the population has a really good fingerprint or face scanner in their palm all the time. So there's been a huge advance in terms of what we can do in terms of technology as an alternative to the password that doesn't require users to adopt new devices, right? They can use the devices they already have. And also, of course, standards have evolved around that. You know, it's no longer one proprietary fingerprint reader protocol here, one proprietary fingerprint reader protocol there. things like the FIDO standards have really unified how we communicate those credentials to third parties. And I think that makes it a lot easier.
So I think we've got two elements there: ease of use and the ability to use some sort of attribute such as a fingerprint, thumbprint, or fingerprint, on a device that you have with you. And let's face it, people tend not to lose their smartphones. They tend to have them with them the whole time. So you don't have a separate item. It's always with them. And also the standards which enable us to become far more open in terms of how we approach this kind of solution. But it strikes me that what we're doing is improving security and making it far easier for the users. And surely that's a win-win for security, where traditionally we were seen as being blockers, but now we're enablers. Totally. Now we're making life so much simpler.
Yep. And it's also important to sort of note that we're really changing the threat model here, right? Because you might say to yourself, well, on my phone, I still have a PIN, right? Every time, you go to do a biometric authentication on your phone, if you can't get it to work, you can still use your PIN. Isn't that the same problem? And it's not. And that's what's really great about this, is that PIN is really only valid on your device. And that's unlocking an encryption key that then gets used to authenticate you. Maybe it's a certificate, maybe it's just a key, whatever it is, to authenticate you to some third party. You're not sending that PIN across the internet to some third party service who may have really bad security. You're not sharing it with other, with other companies or anything like that. It's only valid locally on the device. And so we've changed from a model where I've sent potentially the same really bad password to a lot of websites, and I'm just waiting for the one with the worst security to get breached and make my life a nightmare. And we've changed to a world in which I'm not sending that information anywhere. All I'm doing is making a cryptographic exchange with these other sites. And so it really changes the security model. And of course, because you've already got that phone in your pocket, it makes the usability for the end user so much better.
And again, combining it with those three elements of zero trust, we have the segmentation, which of course reduces any lateral movement should there be a breach. And also we've got the device trust as well, so we can make sure that a device is well trusted. But what are the challenges going forward on passwordless as we see them?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it's not all roses and happy happy times. If it were that easy, right, we would have had it years ago. I mean, the FIDO standard has been around for quite some time. Biometric readers have been around for years now. Why don't we all have passwordless already? And there's a couple of problems. One is, how do we define the term passwordless? It's already a buzzword, but it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. Some organizations are referring to passwordless as simply what we would have maybe called password vaulting in the privileged access management space, where the password exists, but we're hiding it from the end user, and we're relying on biometrics or passwordless to get them into the vault, and then the vault sends the password to a target system. Well, that solves the user getting phished, which is an important thing, but it doesn't solve man-in-the-middle attacks. It doesn't solve pass the hash. It doesn't solve the password database itself being breached in some way. So it's a very different definition, and we need to sort of come to some kind of an agreement in the market of what really is passwordless and what isn't. Also, environments change all the time. So IT environments that are mostly cloud focused already, that are using cloud applications, are one use case that's very, very easy to address. If on the other hand, you're a large multinational bank that has an IBM System 390 in the basement, convincing it not to take a password is a different challenge, right? And so we need to look at how we address that journey and make it not only easy for the users, but also not too painful for the administrative team. And of course, not all biometric technology is created equal, right? It's still a relatively new technology. And so we need to make sure that the end user experience is at least no harder than the passwords they're already used to.
So we're getting the technology, but we still have if our better expressions, back-end technology, which is still complex. So how do we make it work within those environments? But also we now have something which will make it easy for the users and their experience. So what would a passwordless solution start to look like for a very top level?
Sure. So this is the current situation, right? We've got username, password, and MFA in most cases, right? And on each different application, you probably have a different password and potentially even different MFA across an entire suite of applications. And users are used to it because we've trained them, and humans are adaptable, and we can get used to pretty much anything, but it's not a great user experience, right? We all recognize that. And even the best MFA, if you're challenged with it too often, becomes really onerous because you're like, I haven't moved. I'm sitting here at my computer. Nothing has changed. Why do I have to keep doing this, right? So how do we progress from there? Well, we could do this, right? We could have passwordless on all of these different sites, and every time you go to a new site, you register for passwordless, and then you've got it all set up on your phone. But in reality, that doesn't quite solve the problem, because it doesn't really make it less onerous if you've got to enroll 3 separate times to try to do what you're trying to do. We need something that's actually cross-platform. And for that, we can look to a technology that actually already exists. Single sign-on, right? And this is a great example of something that did the job of ease of use and security so well that most people don't even consider it a security tool. They think of it as a convenience tool. I log in and I can get all my applications without having to put my password in again. Well, why was that really created though? Because we didn't want people sending different passwords all the way to all these different companies and websites on the internet, and then ending up in a situation where our security was only as good as the worst security on the website that you gave that password to. We wanted to bring centralized control, right? One single password that we manage, that we can make sure you reset, and that if you need to change it by calling the help desk, we only need to do it in one place. And then we establish these trust relationships with the third-party websites so that we identify with them cryptographically instead of sending that password out over the internet. In reality, it's almost the entire passwordless job done for us. We just need to take it one password further. And that's where passwordless can really come in with single sign-on in concert, so that we enroll for passwordless once, we do our passwordless authentication, and from then on we forget about what other applications we're accessing. As an end user, we don't have to think about it, we don't have to care, we're just single signed on, right? And that gets us almost all the way there in terms of passwordless, but this is where that zero trust part comes in. We can't just stop there, because it's not, as we remember from those 3 pillars, that's only pillar number 1. We're not done yet, right? So we need to think about that device. Well, if I'm authenticating on a passwordless device, but the passwordless device is jailbroken and out of date, is that necessarily trustworthy? Or could somebody have hacked it and stolen the key? We wouldn't know unless we're looking at the device trustworthiness, right? And then can we just walk away once we've logged you into that application and say, job done, good to go? We could, but we shouldn't, right? We should have continuous risk detection with policies that are specific to each application, because what we might allow on application 1, we might not want on application 3. And so we need to be watching what's going on and try to figure out, for example, I authenticated you and I let you remember yourself for 8 hours and not have to do authentication again. But now all of a sudden you've changed locations or you've changed your network state. Maybe that's cause for me doing a step up of authentication or re-authenticating you, right? And so when you bring all of those together, now you have a really good 3-pillar zero trust solution. Richard,
So I think what's interesting, Josh, is you've assumed MFA. I think there's a lot of organizations that still haven't done that. So perhaps as a first step, they should look at the zero trust approach, which brings in the authentication, but then gives you the backup security of device trust, which I think is absolutely critical, because by definition, when you have somebody who's authenticated through MFA, you're raising the level of trust. You therefore are assuming less risk. So if they're on a compromised device, then that's going to be a problem anyway. You're just letting a trusted person through the front door, and we don't want to do that. We can limit that with the segmentation, but you still don't want to get them through the front door. Mm-hmm. But then we also bring on the passwordless and the SSO type solution, which start to do, as I see it, one is reduce that risk of the password being forgotten, all those issues we were talking about, but also using single sign-on enables us to limit the risk of any password getting lost on a third-party site or whatever it is you were saying, because we're controlling access. So we've got a very controlled approach, which is dependent upon the user not only authenticating, but passing the device trust, and the user, the behavioral modeling as well. Is this person logging in from their normal location at the normal time, or is there some kind of strange activity that we've got going on? But what I think is really interesting is how much easier we have now made it for the user, and how much more secure we've made it for the business, because this user now doesn't have to worry about passwords so much. There'll be issues around setting up passwordless, which we'll have to handle that in the first instance. But thereafter, all those password changes could well disappear, because they're just authenticating straight away without that passwordless, using some kind of biometric capability. they're going through their single sign-on interface, which then allows them to go and get all those access all at once. Makes it a lot simpler, a lot easier to use, and a lot more secure, not only at the first instance of entry into the environment and the use of the application or the resource, but also on an ongoing basis by looking at how that access is being used on a continual kind of monitoring. So I think we're achieving two things there: ease of use, better security.
Yeah, and I think I always like to remind folks, because we always get excited, especially in our industry, of, oh, look at all the things I can stop. And there's definitely going to be attacks that you can stop with this, but also think about what you could allow, right? We talked about the things that could go wrong that might cause you to do a step-up authentication or require a biometric or require MFA. But imagine a user's in lockdown, hypothetical situation, where they're on the same device, they haven't moved all day, their behavior is consistent with the pattern of how they do their job every day. I could actually let them authenticate once in the morning and then never bother them for the rest of the day as long as those parameters don't change. Think about that user experience of a user not being bothered with any authentication for the rest of the day as long as all the patterns of things we're concerned about stay consistent. So there's also an opportunity to allow things before that we haven't been able to allow, and users tend to love that. And why would a user go, pull their trusty credit card out and go sign up for some shadow IT application if the one they're authorized to use for work is just so much easier to get into and use? They probably wouldn't, right? And so that's another great objective we can achieve here. So what we're looking for sort of in the future going forward, so that's sort of where we're at right now. The challenges as we look ahead, because we want to be honest about those, is that older things, thick clients, mainframes, things like that, right? We want to be able to get embedded browsers and other forms of authentication in there. Desktop logons, right? It would be really cool if when you logged into that machine in the morning, that was it. And of course, that risk-based authentication, bringing in more and more contextual risk factors is important, because the more we can determine about what's normal, the less we need to bother the user. And so that's sort of the goal as we go forward with this. So thanks very much for attending the session.
All right, thank you so much. A really great presentation there by Richard and Josh. I really enjoyed that discussion about Zero Trust and learned a lot. I hope that you did as well. I've just brought up the poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Duo security solution? And I know a lot of companies out there already use Duo. It's a very popular multi-factor authentication system and zero trust solution, but they've got a lot of new innovations, and I'll leave the poll question up here for a few moments and let everyone respond to that before we move on to our next and final presenter on today's security and protection of email EcoCast. All right, I'll leave that poll question up for everyone to respond to while we announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Son Nguyen from California. Congratulations, Son Nguyen from California. Still one more gift card to give out, and don't forget about our best question gift cards as well. All right. Thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. We appreciate your feedback. But it's time now to move on to our next presenter. I'm excited to introduce Mr. W. Curtis Preston, Chief Technical Evangelist at Druva. Curtis, are you there?
I am here.
Always great to have you back on, Curtis. Take it away.
All right. So let's see here. Just want to click on to my next slide here. So we're going to talk about, this whole EcoCast here is about securing and protecting email services. One of the things that I think is important to understand is to understand that in addition to protecting them from attacks and things like that, from a security perspective, I think it's also important to protect them from things that might do damage to your data. I think one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have with SaaS-based services in general is that they think that data protection or backups, if I could just say backups, are included in that service. And I just want to state unequivocally that at least of the two main services of which I'm aware, which would be Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, those services are not included. They are not part of your contract. They are not part of the expectation that Microsoft or Google are going to provide them for you. And it's really important, therefore, to have some sort of backup. And really, the only way to do that logistically is to have a third party do it on your behalf. So let's just talk about, there have been a bunch of headlines over the last few years, and these headlines continue to underscore over and over that data stored in a cloud service such as Microsoft 365, Google Suite, Google Workspace, or even a cloud vendor such as AWS or whatever, that there is no such thing as a cloud. There is only somebody else's data center. And there are things that can go wrong in a data center, in that data center, or with that application that can render your data either delete it or make it unusable. Things that that include that, things such as ransomware attacks. Now, when we talk specifically about email, I don't think I don't think there are ransomware attacks that are specifically targeting email, but I could be wrong. But there are definitely attacks that are targeting the account itself, deleting emails, deleting accounts, and even more so, there are activities or things that happen of which I'm aware where it doesn't necessarily delete the data, but it renders it unusable. Let me give you a perfect example. I was talking to a Microsoft 365 customer the other day, and one of their users that was on how do you put this? Like a director, a high level person. He had his archive folder, and the reason he had an archive folder was that their inbox had an included retention policy that said that all data in the inbox is automatically deleted after 30 days. And so he had a rule that automatically moved a bunch of emails into his archive folder. Well, for whatever reason, he decided to move his archive folder into his inbox. Again, I have no idea why he did this, but he did it. And the moment he did that, literally everything in his inbox was deleted because there was a retention policy that specified that all of those emails be deleted. And because it was, now in this case, all of the emails got moved into the recycle bin. And you say, well, the only thing that he needed to do was to move it back from the recycle bin. The problem is that by moving the recycle bin by moving the data into and out of the recycle bin, it messes up all of the folders and everything that you would normally see. So that's what I mean, that it didn't necessarily delete the data, but it just jumbled it all up, made it a giant mess, put it all back in his inbox, which was the problem in the first place. So things like that can happen. Deletions of users can happen. Another thing, and this is something that happened with Microsoft 365, where a user deleted an admin accidentally deleted everybody's private chat. and it was another, now, and it's not email, right? Because we're talking about email here, but it's not email, but it's just an example of the kinds of things that you can do, because some people push retention policies, Microsoft retention policies, as a way to do backup. The problem is, well, two problems with that. One is that you can easily misconfigure those policies because they are complicated. You can easily misconfigure those policies, and you could literally, in a few mouse clicks, delete a whole bunch of people's email. Now, that hasn't happened publicly in email, but it has happened in Teams. There was a large company that accidentally deleted 145,000 users' private chats by misconfiguring a retention policy. And then boom, all of that data was gone, and they went to Microsoft to get it back, and Microsoft said, sorry, that the policy did what you asked it to do. There's also this issue of the remote workforce, that by having a lot of people everywhere, and by having people use many more perhaps not as well protected laptops, it increases data loss, increases security risks, increases the risk that you would have from a compliance perspective. And hopefully this will start calming down, but at this point we're still most of us are still working remotely. So it's important. By the way, sorry, I apologize. Earlier I mentioned that there were two reasons why retention policies aren't a good backup methodology. One was that you can accidentally misconfigure them and delete everything, but the other is that all they are doing is holding an additional copy or a separate copy, or whatever, or not allowing the original copy to be deleted, but all of it is stored in the same system that you're protecting. Think of 365 or a Google Workspace as a giant special purpose database application, and and that when you delete an email, what you're really doing is you're simply setting the deletion flag on that email. And when you, if something were to happen to the system itself, it wouldn't protect that email, right? So this is why I'm saying retention, which is keeping the emails around. It's not backup. OneDrive or G Drive, also not a backup. OneDrive or G Drive are things to back up, not a backup, because they are, again, simply another application sitting there in the cloud that needs to be protected. Because if something happens and you, for example, a ransomware attack gets to OneDrive and it populates to your cloud version, there's no backup of that. Versioning is similar. It's similar to retention in that you just keep multiple versions of emails or files. Again, these are all just different versions of things sitting inside the same system. And the same thing with Recycle Bin. It's not really putting your email in a separate, special, protected place. It's just setting a flag on an email saying that it's to be deleted. This is why we talk a lot about the 3-2-1 rule, which is it's an old rule that somebody came up with, 3 copies of everything on 2 different media, one of which is stored somewhere else or offsite. In the case of SaaS-based email services, they don't follow the 2 or the 1. Everything. They got the 3. They got dozens, even hundreds of versions of your files. That's great, but they store all of them in the same place, and it's not protected. So there are lots of little pieces. It's difficult actually to get Microsoft specifically to nail them down on what what their policy is on this. But you can read at different places where you can see that point-in-time restoration of a mailbox is simply not part of what's included. They don't provide a traditional way to restore that data, and the versioning helps, but again, it doesn't solve all problems. There are a number of things that could happen to your data that it doesn't solve. what you need is a lot of different things, right? You need the availability of the data. You also need the solution to be secure. You also need e-discovery as part of the solution. Microsoft does provide e-discovery, features, but typically you're paying extra for those features. So one of the things I'd like you to think about, if you're paying extra for e-discovery, perhaps instead of paying extra for just one feature, what you should look at is paying extra for a third-party backup that provides all of the protections that I was mentioning earlier, but with also adding on top e-discovery as part of the solution, right? And then also the ability to comply with privacy regulations such as GDPR or CCPA. So let's talk about addressing those challenges. Druva has a couple of different solutions. One for 365, one for Google Workspace. They're essentially, very similar services. The idea is that by simply authenticating, you need a Druva account, and then you authenticate that account to the third-party email service, in this case, Microsoft 365. And all you need to do is do that single authentication and then select which accounts and which services you want to protect. And it gives you, we also protect other things, right, such as laptops and mobile devices, AWS, data centers, a number of different things that we protect. And it gives you a consistent experience across all of that, right? So you just configure the policies, you specify how often you want things backed up and how long you want them retained. And then we allow you to, realize more data from that, or more value from that data, such as e-discovery or compliance. The other thing is, one of the difficulties with using retention in 365, which I didn't mention earlier, is it can also significantly increase your storage costs. But if you use a third party for that and you're paying a direct license model for each user, then you don't, and you can allow that. You can apply things like retention policies against your online data and say, for example, all emails older than 30 days are automatically deleted, knowing that you have a compliance copy sitting in the third-party service, and you can save that storage cost. And then also we can deal with the Microsoft throttling issue. Sometimes Microsoft throttles its services because we're talking to your application essentially like a very large user. So that can be throttled. So we handle that. We also back up Google Workspace for those of you that use that. We protect Gmail, Google Drive, and shared drives. Again, same thing. We're a consistent experience across that and any other services that you're using of ours, and the same kind of benefits that I talked about earlier on that as well. The thing to understand about any Druva product is that they are all 100% true SaaS services, meaning that you don't have to install any hardware or software like a lot of our competitors. You simply authenticate to Microsoft 365 and back up. That's it. You get a single dashboard that gives you all of the various information that you need. It's automatic protection. One really important thing to understand, again, comparing to competing services, is that you don't have to worry about storage management, right? So you pay a single fee per user per month, and that automatically includes the amount of storage that you need to back up that user. You don't have to worry about the servers or the storage that would be needed to protect that user. You just tell us how many users you want to protect, pay for that amount, and we will automatically debit your account accordingly. Another really important feature of SaaS-based solutions in general, and it's true of Druva products as well, is that we do automatic feature updates 2 times a month, and you automatically get those new features, whereas with competing products, you would need to upgrade your backup server in order to get those features. Our software is automatically upgraded in the background. You get all new features as soon as they come out. The other thing is that it scales on demand, right? So if you suddenly decide tomorrow that you want to protect, So let me give you a perfect example. We had a customer that they were backing up several thousand laptops, and they were a large pharmaceutical company, a name that you would recognize. And they came to us and said, listen, our CEO has decided that we want to protect all laptops in the company. And we said, in this case, it was a laptop solution. And we said, how many is that? And they said, well, it's like 120,000 more laptops. Well, all they had to do was configure those accounts, and then magically the system automatically scaled to meet their demand. And it's both scaling both up and down, right? So and the reason why the down part matters is when we scale down and we use less compute and less storage on your behalf, that reduces our costs, which we then pass on to you, right? Most competing backup solutions, they might be able to scale up to a certain degree, but very few of them are able to scale down. So think about that when you're comparing solutions. So we have a number of certifications that and security standards that we comply with. Some are a third-party benefit by the fact that we are powered by AWS. All of our infrastructure runs in AWS, so we are able to gain some of those certifications as well. And then we have some specific certifications that we have sought. The one really important thing to understand is that Druva, no one at Druva has access to your data, either on your laptop or in this case in an email service at all, 100%. You are the manager of all keys that would encrypt your data. All data is encrypted before it leaves the service in question, and then encrypted again when it's stored. It uses AES 256 encryption. And you, again, are the manager of all keys. And then finally, you can attend a demo for these services. We do that once a week. You can also try a Druva free trial. There are a couple of different use cases. I realize the URL is a little long there, druva.com/use-cases/SaaS-backup. I realize that URL is a little long, but it is what it is. So with that, I will turn things back over to David.
Great presentation, as always, Curtis. Good to have you. Let's go ahead and take some questions from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Druva solution? And this is your opportunity to select what you'd like here as a follow-up. If you'd like a personal demo or like to try this out for yourself, or maybe a customer case study. So if you have a question, now's the time to get it in. First question I wanted to ask you, Curtis. Let's see here. They're asking, where exactly does Druva store the data that it's protecting?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I can answer that in a couple different ways. One is in AWS, right? But more specifically, we use AWS S3 and also S3, the archived here as well. But specifically, the reason why that matters is that we're using object storage to store your data. And that's one of the beautiful things about the cloud is that if you use the cloud the way it's meant to be used, you're going to be using object storage to store backups, not block storage. Competing solutions sometimes use block storage because they find it to be a more high performance, but that's only because they're writing to it as monolithic backup images. We actually do source-side global deduplication so that not only are we storing individual files in S3, we're actually storing individual pieces of individual files. Each one of those little pieces is an object in S3. And what that allows us to do is when we're doing a restore, we can actually request hundreds or thousands, even tens of thousands of objects at the same time. And so while a request of an individual object might be slow, when you're requesting hundreds or thousands of them at the same time, it's actually possible to actually outperform block storage if you use S3 in that way.
Very interesting. Okay. Cool. And then next question here, they're asking, did you say that Druva can protect Microsoft 365 email and Microsoft Teams, both?
Yes. So in Microsoft specifically, we do Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Online, as well as the OneDrive.
Got it. Okay. And then
all
what
with a
about
single, basically a single console.
Yeah, very nice. And then I know we didn't really talk about this today, but could Druva protect, say, on-premises email running in a VM?
Yeah, so we back up. We don't have direct protection for Exchange, but we do have protection for on-premises workloads that are running in both VMs and physical servers. So if your Exchange, for example, is a VSS-supported application, so if you're comfortable backing up the Exchange by simply backing it up from the VMware level or the Hyper-V level, and you're comfortable with using VSS as a mechanism to provide application consistent snapshots, which you should be, because it is certainly a supported way to do it. That would be the way we would protect an on-premises Exchange environment. But if you have Exchange running in a physical server, in Windows, then we wouldn't have a direct way to protect it other than VSS.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And then there's a question here. They say that being able to recover deleted email for compliance reasons is important at our company. How long can Druva retain the email that it protects?
As long as you need us to.
Okay.
It's all included in, that's up to you.
Yeah. And then there's another question here. What's the licensing model for protecting mail? Is it done by mailbox?
Yeah, it's done by user, right? So basically, you're going to so from a SaaS services, so things like 365, Google Drive, Salesforce. We also protect Salesforce. You're paying we call it per seat, right? So it's per user that is going to be protected. And it doesn't matter whether you're protecting just 365 email or 365 email and OneDrive and SharePoint, but you're going to be protecting per seat and per application, specifically meaning you would pay more for somebody who is protecting 365 and Salesforce than you would somebody that's just having 365 protected on their behalf. So it's per seat. When we talk about data center wise, then we're talking about globally deduplicated gigabytes per month. But in the SaaS services, it's per seat.
Got it. Okay. And then so you said to get started and try out Druva, there is a free trial that folks can do?
There is a free trial. It's not a self-started free trial, right? You do talk to somebody so that they can make sure that we help you out there. But yes, there is a free trial that you can do.
Excellent. All right. Well, Curtis, it's always good to have you back on again. Thanks for being here.
Anytime.
For more information on Druva, check out the handouts tab there as well. And link number 3 on the list is how to enhance Microsoft 365 data protection with third-party backup. Really well done document, a lot of different case studies from a lot of different companies who are using Druva and exactly how it helped them. So make sure that you get that done, protect your email, protect your data in the cloud, because you never know when one of these attacks are going to happen. All right. Well, thank you to everyone who responded to the poll so far. I'm just going to leave that up. Let's get a few more responses while I announce our final Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Krista Riley from Washington, D.C. Congratulations, Krista Riley from Washington, D.C. We'll also be announcing or contacting the prize winners of our Best Question prizes after the event today via email. All right, and with that, it's time to wrap up today's EcoCast. Before you go, don't forget to check out the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. It's where we interview IT innovators in 10 minutes, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but a great way to stay up to date on the latest in enterprise tech. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming EcoCast or MegaCast event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we would love to chat with you about being on an upcoming event. Thank you so much to everyone out there in the audience for joining us on the event today. I hope that you learned a lot on the EcoCast, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.